Doug said I can't be defined, but I'm going to try and define myself. I get to call myself a professional inventor. It just tickles me pink every time I get to say that. And I owe a lot of my ability to say that to this very event. And I want to tell you why. So, once upon a time, I was part of this group called Mindshare Labs. And Mindshare Labs was born of this very event. And, you know, eventually we turned into Sin Labs, but back then it was this group of people who sat around in a bar and just came up with ways to make your lives more interesting and more fun when you come to this event. We wanted to bring stuff, interactive technologies, art, science, whatever. We were just sitting around. We called ourselves a drinking club with an art problem. Because that's what we did. We got together and we played. We had fun. It was so much fun, and it continues to be fun to this day. And some of what came of that group has transformed my life in some amazing ways. Doug asked me to come up and give sort of an update on the projects we've been up to. So here it goes. Once upon a time, I made this thing called the Cloud Mirror for this very event. And this project was born of a desire to fuck with all of you. So you'd show up to the event and you'd get your badge, but your badge was coded. And when you walked up to this installation, which was a screen up against the wall, you would come face to face with the other side of your online identity, that part that's comprised of all the trash you're talking on Facebook and all those pictures that people are tagging you in when you're holding a red cup, usually here, frankly. And you'd see this thought bubble superimposed over your head, and in that thought bubble would be something ridiculous you'd put on the internet, and you're like, oh no, is that really me? And then to see yourself, to see the badge, you wouldn't see this coded badge, you wouldn't see that QR code, you'd actually see a photograph, one of those horrible photographs that someone had tagged you in. And you know what happened? I was scouted out of this very event by Sundance Film Festival. And I had the incredible honor of bringing that project to Sundance Film Festival and putting it in their art gallery. And I got to show it to Robert Redford, which was pretty cool. And thousands of people got to come by this thing and participate in it and come face to face with their online digital identity. Really opened my eyes to how this technology could just transform someone's experience. But that isn't the end of the story, because following up on the tail of that, I got commissioned to do a follow-up piece called the Identity Tree, which basically creates a tree of yourself online. It goes out online, fetches all the same information, but renders it in quite a different way. You actually get this, you can see this leaf being grown with all your information. And this thing is still on display in a museum in Salt Lake City, all because I made this thing for Mindshare LA. I love puppets. And one thing I developed for this event was called Sakioki, the world's first sock puppet karaoke machine, because it turns out that karaoke is a really awkward position to put yourself in. You're standing up in front of a bunch of people and you're singing, in my case, badly. And it turns out if you put a sock puppet in somebody's hand, oh, they'll do it. And if you give them the opportunity to animate somebody else's face, all the better. And then this weird thing happened to me, Brent Bushnell, and Dan Busby. We wound up being on the last season of Extreme Makeover Home Edition as the guys who make weird inventions for television. And I got the opportunity to pull this puppet project out of mothballs and revisit it. So we built a whole puppet show for this little girl in New York who had dwarfism and who were building this whole center where she could have fun with her friends. So we built her this giant puppet show, and in the process, of course, I get to mess with my friends. The idea behind this puppet show, of course, is that you'd be able to move this puppet controller around and animate other people. So you could have a puppet show with your family, her family, with the stars of the show, with us, with Dan Busby, who's pretty much my favorite puppet. You know, the very first project I did at Mindshare was this thing. It was this Not Pocket Simon. It was a Simon game that 4 people played simultaneously. Anybody ever played Simon? Right, it's fun when you play by yourself. When you play with 3 other people, it's miserable. And the reason is because you're standing there and you're trying to remember a complex pattern. You have a glass of wine or beer in your hand. You can't talk to anyone you're playing with, and you can't leave because you'd be letting them down. So I learned a lot that day. One thing I kept doing was making video games larger. And one thing that me and Rob Godshaw did very recently was this thing called the Space Bike. And we installed this at Mindshare recently. Some of you may have played it. The idea was you could jump on this thing and play asteroids with a bicycle. a personal thank you has to go out to this event. I do some pretty awkward things on stage, like stand up wearing an entire suit of biometric sensors, EKG, EEG, pulse, respiration, the whole thing. And Dougie convinced me to stand up and give a talk about that. That very night, dressed as I was, wearing $1,000 of biosensors, I met my girlfriend at this event. And we continue to be together to this day. The brilliant and beautiful Jennifer Jordan in the back, right there. What she saw in that geek, I will never know. Now, when you bring socially awkward people like me into contact with attractive, smart people like yourselves, if you've ever met me more than once, you'll notice I forget names and faces like crazy. And so this is something I invented this year called the face logger. And the face logger is, we kind of talked about this already today a little bit, but I dangle this always on camera around my neck, and I record my interactions with other people. It's always recording. When I meet somebody and I want to remember that interaction, I press a button. Later, that video is uploaded, and someone on Mechanical Turk, an anonymous person far away, captures the best image of your face, figures out if you're already part of my Facebook circle, gets your name from the audio, transcribes our conversation, and then delivers it all back to me as a flashcard so I can review it later. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally met that person. It works great. So what comes next? Oh, that's a hard question. I have a piece of art upstairs, and I encourage you all to go upstairs and play with it. But you know, I'm going to continue to tinker. I'm going to continue to invent because it is truly my passion, and I love doing nothing more than coming up with neat things and turning them into real products. I'm working on my first consumer product right now. But I will tell you what comes next. I will tell you what I will always do. When Dougie Fresh says, hey dude, you want to come bring something fun to Mindshare? I will always say yes. Thank you.